home run riches from the Maryland Lottery, I have the chance to win cash or to be selected as a contestant of the game. I can win $500 for every Orioles home run, plus $5,000 for a grand slam. Things can get pretty nuts! Make the right call and play home run riches from the Maryland Lottery.
What's up, guys? Matt Weyrich here. Before we start today's episode, wanted to jump in and just add a quick note here that Trevor Rogers was placed on the 15-day injured list shortly after we wrapped up recording. Obviously, we are going to be talking about Rogers in this episode and did not know at the time that he will be out until at least May 11th with what the Orioles are calling an illness. He's going to miss at least 2 starts. Cameron Foster was recalled from AAA Norfolk to provide some bullpen help with the Orioles having their doubleheader on Thursday. So their rotation obviously in flux a bit for the next 2 weeks, but just wanted to add that quick note before we get started. Good morning, Baltimore. It is Thursday, April 30th, and thank you for tuning in to the latest episode of the Early Birds podcast. I'm your host, Matt Weyrich, alongside columnist Josh Tolentino. Josh, been a minute since you and I shared this space together. We've had a draft in between, which has been absolutely bonkers. Obviously huge for the Ravens with everything that's been going on, and huge on this show as we have focused very heavy on Ravens. But we are now going to take a look at the Orioles today as they have been through an up and down start that we've been able to witness from the press box down on the field and everything in between. And, you know, it's been quite a ride. But how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, man. I'm going to put you on the spot right here as the Orioles push a doubleheader against the Houston Astros to Thursday. The day that all of our listeners are hopefully tuning into this pod. What do you have one memorable rain delay memory, like a crazy story, or just when you think of a game getting banged, or if before the game gets banged, actually, when you're in that delay process, which by the way they're much quicker nowadays, but I guess, like, do you have any memorable story at all that from a rain delay?
Oh, no, 100%. There's one that stands out to me, and that was last season against Kansas City. There was a rain delay for a getaway game, right? And so when it's a getaway game and the team...
This was in Kansas City?
No, this was here in Baltimore. And the Royals obviously were not supposed to come back to Baltimore again the rest of the season. So when that happens, it actually falls in MLB's hands, not the home team's hands, to make the call on the rain delay. And it actually ended up being like an 8 to 10 hour rain delay before we finally got the game in late that night. We were stuck at the ballpark all day. But I was just hanging out in the media area cafeteria room and sitting there eating pancakes because it was supposed to be a morning game. So they had pancakes there they were serving. And who sits down next to me but none other than Jim Palmer, who then has his own plate of pancakes, obviously very famous for eating pancakes himself. And I enjoyed a plate of pancakes and chatted with Jim Palmer for an hour. Who can say that they have had a stack of pancakes with none other than Cakes himself? So pretty cool moment there. Was just sharing stories, and he's a talker, let me tell you, but always great to hear from a legend like that, and a cool moment that I obviously went home and bragged to my dad about immediately.
Matt and Cakes, I'm assuming that didn't happen when the Orioles ended up postponing Wednesday's game to a much. Could you kind of give our viewers just a quick scene, before we really dive into the nitty gritty here with the Orioles? But what was the setup like? But when you moments before you found out the game was going to get postponed to Thursday on Wednesday.
Yeah, we arrived to the ballpark Wednesday, knowing that it was unlikely the Orioles were going to be playing, but they were going to try and get it in. And it was 1 minute before we were supposed to be let into the clubhouse, talk to players pregame, and that is when we got the text that it was not going to be played, and it was being moved to Thursday for a doubleheader. So drove all the way out there just to find out there was going to be no game. So a bit disappointing there for sure, but I made the most of it by taking my car into the shop to get an oil change and brake pads replaced. So,
and most importantly, you had your story ready.
Yes. I had the pre-write already ready to go, so we were able to get that up really quickly, but took advantage, had sudden free time, and was able to take advantage. And also, it means that you and I get to record this here podcast in the afternoon as opposed to late Wednesday night, which was kind of expecting us to do with the schedule of everything. So not going to complain too much. It will be a long day Thursday with the doubleheader, but you know what? I don't mind watching 2 baseball games in a day. 2 for the price of 1 is not a bad deal.
Yeah, and you know what? Let's dive right into it. Wednesday's game was supposed to be the 30th game of the season. And right now, Matt, the Orioles are at 14 and 15, their record, as the calendar month is about to turn to May. What do kids nowadays say about teams that are floating right around the that average mark?
Yeah, they're mid, and that's exactly what the Orioles have been so far this season. This doubleheader on Thursday will decide if they finish April above or below 500. They are not going to be able to finish at it, so they'll be on one side or the other, but they really have been a 500 team this year for the most part. A lot of good things that we've seen that are things we like, things that we think could bode well for this team for making a run in the playoffs, and also things that starting to undermine exactly that, things that have been concerning about this team so far, and things that need to be cleaned up. So we thought we'd do a bit of what we're going to call trust factors with this team so far, and look at for each 8 total early season trends that have emerged with the Orioles, and determine just how sustainable they really are. What are the factors that got them to where they are being a 500 team so far, and just how much we think those are going to be continued, either good or bad things, the rest of the way. So I'm going to get us started here, Josh. And my number one factor here that has contributed to the Orioles being a 500 team is correctable mistakes. This has been something that was really frustrating for this team last year as well, and certainly contributed to their really early season slide, ultimately resulting in Brandon Hyde being fired. But so far this year, some of those problems have carried over. Entering play on Wednesday, the Orioles were tied for first in MLB in pickoffs. They were tied for 5th in errors, tied for 8th in caught stealing, and tied for 4th in wild pitches. So that's base running problems, it's fielding problems, it's pitching problems. Hitting all corners of this roster so far this year have been mistakes that clearly need to be cleaned up. And asked about that Tuesday, after their win over the Astros, particularly about being all the pickoffs, but also just correctable mistakes in general. Greg Albanese said, this is something that needs to be cleaned up. It needs to be cleaned up fast. So I couldn't agree more. I think this is something that, is possible to fix, but at the same time, the team's got to prove that they can clean these things up, because it has been a problem going on a year now.
Yeah, and it certainly comes off as a bit surprising, considering Craig Albanese, when basically his one requirement was to, when I asked him way back before spring training at the outset of really his managerial career here in Baltimore, what is a requirement you have for your players? And he said, show up. And immediately after that, when it comes to their daily presence at the field, and everyone knows about his day one mantra of resetting the tone once players arrive to work, is the basics. And fundamentals was a phrase that was really pounded on by Craig Albanese and his staff. And it's not like they didn't, it's not like they ignored all of those things. You and I and Jacob got a up close view at all of those fundamental drills, and really just the back to the basics of the sport, as as easy as that sounds, and completely missing here throughout this early stretches of the season. I mean, at first we love to come back to the phrase that it's early, but there have just been many repeatable instances, and certainly this bug has not been shy of biting a specific player, specific position group. It's been, as you laid it out, with all those stats there, it's been everyone. Even Gunnar Henderson, had that infamous game where he was picked off twice there at first base. And again, it's but you think about the pieces in place. I think going back to our original setup of this segment, is this sustainable? Is this not sustainable? Do you see them fixing this issue, and hopefully what can be the near future for the Orioles?
Yeah, it's something that has to start now. It's hard to, fix some things like this. I mean, PFPs has been talked about because we've seen several mistakes made by pitchers on the mound, particularly defensively, so far this year, that have caused big outs. Or big problems. We saw something, in the Kansas City Royals series last week. At the end of the game, the Orioles lose on a walk-off wild pitch, and Ryan Helsley throws the ball in the dirt, which is obviously can't happen with a runner on third, especially with Michael Garcia, who is there, the speed that he has. But then you see Adley Rutschman go for it all, trying to pick the ball as opposed to trying to get in front of it and maybe knock it down. Now, he was defended by Craig Alpernaz for doing exactly that, saying that he had to go for the pick in order to stop that ball, because just getting in front of it was never going to keep it close enough to stop Garcia. But I think there's some debate in that area of whether or not he should have gone for maybe the safer play and just tried to keep the ball in front of him and not let it get too far away. So there are little instances like that that add up over the course of a season, and especially because there are only 27 outs in a game, and you give up a free out here or there, whether it's getting picked off, whether it's allowing a runner to move up on the base pass when they shouldn't, things like that, that adds up, especially with all the close one-run games that the Orioles have been playing so far. Every out counts, every run counts, and the Orioles can't afford to, especially considering that neither their pitching staff nor their offense has really been carrying the team thus far. They can't afford to be giving up anything on either end. So, Josh, let's go transition over into your number one factor here that has contributed to their mid-start.
Yeah, and you know what? You went, this is very constructive on both sides. I'm actually going to go on the positive side here, Matt, with that. Entering this season, at least externally, and certainly by myself and, even us in our conversations, the bullpen, that was the club's, I felt, again, externally, felt like the biggest question mark entering this season. Matt, we're 30 games in. This is a strength, and I'm going to go, I'm going to start off right here and say this is sustainable. And you look at you look at the main addition of the group. So let's focus on the headliner, Ryan Helsley. Man, 7 for 7 in save opportunities. I believe through his first 12 outings has not had a blown save. I think he's the third pitcher in Orioles history to record seven saves without a blown save in his first 12 outings, joining Lee Smith and George Sherrill. And it's not just Ryan Helsley. You look at Ryan Helsley, Rico Garcia, Anthony Nunez, even Grant Wolfram. You look up the four of them and their Baseball Savant pages, it is a whole lot of red. And, just going down the line there, Rico Garcia, I'm not sure how much more needs to be said. I've written on this topic, have expressed, vocally how much of a big believer I am in his career turnaround, his resurgence. I believe he's just still at one hit, right, Matt?
I believe so, yeah. Just a home run. One solo blast.
Yep, so just an incredible role here to start the season. And then Anthony Nunez, the youngest of the group. You could say a lot of these guys were question marks or had questions surrounding them entering this season. But certainly with Anthony Nunez, former position player in college at the University of Tampa, only 24 years old, making his MLB debut. For the most part, he has been nails. Grant Wolfram, again, the list goes on, and now they get some reinforcements by the way of Andrew Kittredge, who had a decent outing in his first MLB appearance with the Orioles this past week, but. Man, just again going down the line, and Mike Elias, he wasn't ready to say, pound the chest and give himself a round of applause when we spoke with him a few days ago about this topic. He said again, it's still early, and he doesn't, the bullpen could go many different ways throughout the season, but it's just starting really with that trio. Even that quad. Let's throw Grant Wolfram in there. They have been lights out to start the season, and again, bullpen ERA much. Significantly lower than the MLB average.
Yeah, if you look at how Orioles pitchers have fared in the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings so far this year, which is for the most part been exclusively relievers because they haven't had starters go very deep in games. The Orioles, with pitching in those 3 innings this year, they rank 11th in ERA at 3.90, but they are 5th in WHIP at 1.2 and 4th in K per 9 at 10.0, one of only 4 teams in baseball with a K per 9 over 10 in those late innings. To get strikeouts like that at such a prolific rate in the late innings is something that this team really was lacking, not just last year, but in 2024 as well. Craig Kimbrell, fared admirably for that first half of 24, but for the most part, they didn't have a lot of high strikeout setup men, and that's exactly what we have seen, particularly from Anthony Nunez, but we're also seeing that from Grant Wolfram in key spots as well. Ryan Helsley's obviously holding his own as their closer. So getting a lot of strikeouts late in innings, which I agree, Josh, gives me confidence that this group is going to be able to sustain just how successful it's been so far. As surprising as it has been for this bullpen group to be as effective as it is because of how unproven those guys were to start the year, they are proving themselves. And that shows the confidence that the Orioles had in them was certainly warranted.
Yeah, and I think it's fair for Mike Elias to warrant that caution flag, as you know, when we look here, we're just over a couple dozen games in as we turn to May. But I think back to late February and early March, and I sat down with their new bullpen coach, or Hank Conger, and I essentially phrased my question to him is that there's a lot of skepticism, including myself, when it comes to this bullpen group. What do you think, is this group's ceiling? And he said it flat out right there during our conversation that we could be one of the best groups in MLB. And, he wasn't using Ryan Helsley as an anchor, which, could be expected entering the season, just given the financial resources towards Helsley and just the expectations after what he went through last year in New York and wanting to make a resurgent turnaround. But again, Hank Conger, he said we could be one of the best groups in MLB. And, I'm not a firm believer that they are there yet in that tier, but certainly a steadying presence, especially in those late innings, man, with a lot of strikeouts from this group in particular. I do think this is a sustainable trust trend in our group of rankings here on Early Birds.
I think I agree with you there. Now, my second factor here that's contributed to the Orioles' so-so start is their defense. And I think this was something that we were concerned about coming into the year, particularly in the outfield. But with the injuries that they had to start the year, not only losing Jordan Westberg at third base and Jackson Holliday at second base, but for Adley Rutschman to go down for 10 games as well, it has manifested itself a little bit with this team as not necessarily something that is completely dragging the team down. They're by DRS so far this year, defensive run saved, they're at -2 as a team. That's tied for 8th worst in MLB. It's not like they are the Phillies, who are -17 worst in baseball and just fired
their manager.
Yeah, it hasn't gotten that bad, but it is certainly something that is a negative aspect of this team right now. And the positions that jump out as far as negative DRS so far this year are third base at -1, shortstop at -2, right field at -3, and center field at -4. So that outfield defense truly has been a problem. Outs above average also does not like Taylor Ward's play in left field as much as DRS does. So there has been some question marks maybe at all three outfield positions. Ward, I'm perfectly fine with, I think, in left field, someone who's still learning that weird left field dimensions. But center and right have been problems this year. And on the infield, I think Kobe Mayo has held his own so far, but really, Blaze Alexander's defense overall hasn't been graded very well. Both guys have passed the eye test. I don't know that I'm necessarily worried about either player at third base. And for shortstop, for Gunnar, the analytics have never really liked him. And really what that's about is his ability to move to his right on balls away from the infield in the range that he has there, going to his backhand. The analytics do not like the way he plays those balls, and that kind of hurts his range factor, which really has brought down those numbers for him. So I think, again, a guy who passes the eye test to me and has certainly cleaned up a lot of the mistakes defensively that he had, particularly in 2024 when he led the position in errors. I think he took a big step forward last year in being able to cut that down. And now this year, you're hopeful that he can really become a plus defender, maybe somebody who could be a Gold Glove caliber player. I don't think we've seen that kind of defense from Gunnar Henderson at shortstop so far this year, but certainly I think a guy who holds down the position just fine. It really is the outfield for me, and I don't know that we are going to see big steps forward in that department. So it is something that can get better as the season goes on, similar to the correctable mistakes, but at a certain point, you are who you are defensively. And, as a manager, Craig Albertaz is going to have to manage his team accordingly for things like that. I mean, Colton Cowser, I think, has been a plus defender in the outfield. In Tuesday night's game, the Orioles opted not to sub out Tyler O'Neill in right field for Colton Cowser as a defensive replacement. Thought that was an interesting decision by Albertaz. Asked about that after the game. He said he really likes Tyler O'Neill in right field, citing his 2 Gold Gloves out there. It's been 5 years since Tyler O'Neill won a Gold Glove. So, at a certain point, like I said, you are who you are. You do have to be honest about the kind of team that you have and how to best utilize those strengths. So it's something that I think as the season goes on, we get more of a clear picture of who really is a plus defender and who is actively detracting from that aspect of the team. But as far as whether or not I think it's sustainable, I think it is a problem that can improve as the season goes on, but only really by so much. And it's something that I think the offense is really going to have to overcome with the bat to justify some guys' presences in the lineup.
You are who you are. I love that line that you just dropped there. And I'm not ready to jump the ship here to say that they are ready to turn around, because maybe this exactly is who they are. And you look at the personnel in place, but also look at the voice in the room, Matt, and Jason Bourgeois, who by all my interactions has been a great coach and a person to interact with at work. But there was an expected learning curve, not just for Craig Albernaz, but even the coaches that he brought in place. Jason Bourgeois, just in his third year of coaching at the MLB level, just with his second team after 2 seasons with the White Sox. So he's also still learning Baltimore and the ins and outs of this organization, of the dimensions. We've seen him early on put in extra work with Taylor Ward, even getting these crazy ideas when it comes to base running, which is a totally different subject, which goes to your first point. But as it pertains to defense, there was going to be an expected learning curve with Craig Albernaz and his staff, and I think that we're witnessing that here in many different aspects. So, I'd love for them to prove me wrong, but not ready to right the ship in terms of this is an easily corrected issue.
Yeah, and look, this is a young team by all regards, whether it's the outfield, it's the infield, the catching position. There are a lot of guys still coming into their own at the major league level, and there is room for growth for a lot of these guys. I think we're seeing it in real time with Kobe Mayo, who we actively expected to be a negative net value at third base. And so far this year, I think has turned a lot of heads and made a lot of good plays. And there are still things about his game that need to be cleaned up. There was an error he made at the end of the Kansas City game that didn't end up coming back to haunt them, but it was a routine play where he had a little bit too much time, not one where he's having to rush himself, but just because he takes so much time in his throw, ends up throwing it away and almost costs the Orioles a run there. So, those are kinds of things that for a young player to be able to learn how to gather himself and use the time correctly and not overthink plays like that. Those are kinds of things that you expect a young player to clean up as time goes on. So that there's many examples of that, whether it's him, whether it's Cowser, whether it's Dylan Beavers in the outfield, who I think needs to be a little bit more aggressive in his routes as well. There's a lot of things that I think can be improved midseason, but there are also, I think, warning signs overall about the collective defense of this team and how that's prioritized on a day-to-day basis in terms of the lineups they put together. It's just not going to be the biggest asset for this club at the end of the day, and that's something they can live with as long as the offense is able to pick them up.
One surprising sign, from this defense. Let's look at first base. Pete Alonso. He is, by all accounts, made me a bigger believer in what he's been able to accomplish there defensively between his diving stops, his picks. He has certainly caught me by surprise. I don't know about you, Matt.
No, 100%. And our colleague, Jacob Calvin-Meyer, had a great story in the Baltimore Sun on Wednesday morning highlighting exactly that, the work that Alonso has been putting in, particularly with the small training glove that he's been using in drills to fine-tune his play at first base. So definitely give Jacob's story a read, some really great insight there onto what exactly has been part of this turnaround for Alonso, which certainly with the way he has not really been producing at the plate, has been great to see that he's at least been able to, not just play good defense at first, but also he's drawing walks. He's still hitting the ball hard. I think all the signs were there of Pete Alonso still making an impact on this team, despite the fact that he has not been the Pete Alonso we've expected at the plate. Josh, your number 2 factor here.
This season, Fast Play Home Run Riches from the Maryland Lottery has a whole new prize. Players who enter the Contestant of the Game promotion will have a chance to win a VIP game day experience, including $2,000 for being selected, premium seat access, and more. Please play responsibly.
Yeah, let's turn the page on why the Orioles are mid. They are struggling with breaking balls. And I mean, we, before the show, you and I were looking through some of the players who are contributing to this the most. And, you want to start with Colton Cowser, Kobe Mayo, Blaze Alexander, Dylan Beavers. They all have poor metrics against breaking balls, when they're at the dish. But the list really it extends beyond that. It's affecting a large portion of the lineup. The Orioles, they have the third worst weighted on base average in MLB. Against breaking pitches specifically at just 237. And, when you're an opposing pitcher, an opposing pitching coach, and you're game planning against the Orioles, there are so many metrics available. And, all of this is compiled into easy to digest information for these pitchers. But I mean, really, is there much more to it? Obviously, there is much more to it. But when it comes to game planning against the Orioles, throwing, breaking, and off speed too. I'll even throw that in there, which they're actually mid against that. To rephrase, to reuse
definitely
our
mid 16th in WOBA against off speed pitches.
To reuse our phrase of the show. So, fastballs, when it comes to percentages, down here, off speed and breaking way up here when it comes to game planning against these Orioles. And, I will point out that there are some metrics that suggest there's patience being preached by Dustin Lin, their new hitting coach who came over from the Phillies, and Brady North, who came over from the Tampa Bay Rays. Their chase rate is lower than the MLB average. Their zone swing percent is higher. So, you look at just those two things, and it shows you that they're searching for better pitches and better pitches to make contact with, with what is realistic in their realm. But man, when that break speed is coming towards the plate, man, these guys have been struggling.
Yeah, and just to make sure we're differentiating, breaking balls are the curveball, slider, sweeper category, whereas off-speed is the change-up, splitter category. So change-ups and splitters not part of this, more of the curveballs, sliders, sweepers that they've had problems with. And yeah, it has been a prevalent issue. I mean, at the bottom of the list, you see Colton Cowser, who still does not have a hit off a breaking pitch so far this year. Certainly a concerning development for him. A lot has been talked about his struggles against change-ups so far this year, but it's extended to pretty much anything that isn't a fastball so far. And he, has looked a little bit better here over the last week, made some tweaks to his swing in Kansas City that the Orioles seem to be happy with. We talked about that, I believe, on an episode last week. But overall, Cowser is someone who has really been relegated to a bench role. Leody Taveras starting each of the last 4 games at center field, and that has been a product of his play as opposed to the play of what we've seen from Cowser. And Taveras, actually the highest WOBA on the team of players against breaking pitches so far this year. So that bodes well for his ability to continue the success that he's had at the plate.
That also bodes well with your take for him to leaving the nest on Leody Taveras being the everyday center fielder until he cools off.
Man, he's been doing it. I think I was spot on with that take. It's exactly what we have seen from Craig Albernoz in terms of the lineups he has put out there. And we even saw Dylan Beavers get a start in center field against a lefty over Colton Cowser, which obviously was very unexpected for a guy who is much less proven than Cowser at the major league level, and certainly defensively as well. But that just shows just how much they really are taking into account Cowser's struggles at the plate so far. Just has not been able to turn into success. So until he's able to really start to put together more consistent at-bats, I think he's going to be more of a part-time player, as my light just goes off. But yeah, I'd say overall, this is a product of a young team. Young teams tend to hunt fastballs and struggle with breaking balls. It's a pretty common trend across all young players, and I think we're seeing it from the Orioles as a whole.
Yeah, and they do have a bit of a whiff issue, Matt. 27.3% total whiff rate, 36.9% against breaking balls. That's second worst in MLB. Though when they are making contact with breaking pitches, they have the third highest hard hit rate against breaking pitches. So, finding that fine line of trimming down the whiffs and, again, making contact with those breaking pitches. A tough assignment here for Dustin Lin and Brady North moving forward. I'm going to go ahead and say this is that they have the ability to turn this around. You know, I pointed to some of the underlying metrics between their chase rate and their contact rate in the zone. So, you know, Craig Albernaz, you know, even when we've asked him this multiple times throughout the season, he said he likes the approaches. That, you know, I can hear it in his Boston accent, his Northeastern accent in my head right now. You know, we like the approaches, and it comes down to really just making contact with those breaking pitches and not being able to chase. So, are you ready to turn it over to your third take here, Matt?
Yes, and it actually goes in line with a player who has been the rare exception in terms of he has been crushing breaking balls this year, and that is Adley Rutschman, who 15 games into the season looks like he is back to his old self. An OPS over 1,000, 3 home runs on the year, 13 RBI. Really locked in, going the other way a ton, and I'm going to say this is 100% sustainable. Maybe not to the degree of an 1,000 OPS the rest of the year, but for him, you know, what we saw over the first 2 years of his career, and now the last 2 have been quite a struggle. I think that that player has very much still been in there. We saw some flashes of it last year with injuries really getting in the way of any kind of bounce back for him. Injuries to both obliques, but this year he's fully healthy, and man, does he look like the Adley Rutschman of old. And how important is that just to this Orioles lineup as a whole, man? Since the start of the 2024 season, in games Rutschman has played, when the Orioles win, he has an 805 OPS. When the Orioles lose, he's a 619 OPS. I get Gunnar Henderson is the best player on this team, there's no doubt about it, but Adley Rutschman is just as much an engine for this team as anybody, and when he is right, Orioles wins follow.
Yeah, and I will say, Matt, I was getting a bit concerned after, you know, he made that turn at first base at the beginning of the month and ends up going on the IL. I believe it was with an ankle. And Matt, every game since he has a hit. You know, since his return to the lineup, he missed 11 days in total. So you know, on the shorter end of that IL stay, and he gets right back in the lineup. Not just in the lineup, but again in where he belongs in the lineup, in the heart of the lineup. And man, he is just mashing 9 hits, a few home runs, and you know, he is just continuing to do the thing. So Adley Rutschman, again, to your point, he looks like the Adley of old, and it certainly looks sustainable. And I think his ability to come back from his time away from the injury helped prove to that point.
Yeah, and not just is he impacting the offense as much as he is, which he's been the number 3 hitter for the most part this year when in the lineup, but defensively too, Rutschman has for the most part been a true asset for this team, particularly within framing. And I know that coming into the year, people were kind of like, is framing going to be as important with ABS? Man, only 4 or 5, maybe 6, 7 pitches a game are being challenged. For the whole rest of the game, you're still very much reliant on catcher framing, and that's an area of his game that has really improved over the years. Defensively as a whole, though, I mean, his pop times have always been really good, but people have been like, he isn't throwing out as many base runners. I think some of that was some of the pitchers that he had throwing to him. Most notably Corbin Burns was extremely slow to the plate. Catchers had no chance of throwing out guys when Corbin Burns was on the mound. He was good enough where it didn't matter, but I think that is something that you have to take into account when you're talking about catchers being able to throw out base runners. And Rutschman's pop time is elite. He's got good arm strength, not as good as Basayo. Basayo's arm strength is phenomenal, but his fluidity behind the plate has been evident. And, this is a player who, just as recently as the 2024 playoffs, in a playoff game, James McCann started at catcher and Rutschman at DH. I mean, if that wasn't an indictment on Adley Rutschman's defense as anything from that coaching staff, then there's nothing. I mean, for him to be the player where that happened to him in 2024 to now, where he is the true defensive star, I mean, of this team, I would argue he might be the best defensive player on the Orioles right now. It is a true testament to the work that he has put in defensively and the asset that he has become to this team. I mean, there were people talking about trading him this offseason with Basayo signed to his extension. I know the Orioles have to be pretty glad they didn't actually really seriously entertain any thought like that.
All-around excellence from Adley Rutschman. That does not bode well for my war draft against you, as you took both catchers, dating back to, again, our war draft during spring training.
Yeah, we're going to have to check the tallies on that soon here. Maybe a May 1st update's in order.
Maybe let's kick that down all the way to September.
Hey, Rico Garcia's F4 is looking pretty good.
Yeah.
Or did I take Rico?
You actually took Rico.
Oh,
so
I snuck up. I got Rico.
Let's
great.
move on to the next one, and I'm going to jump on board with you to say that Adley's overall excellence again is sustainable, and specifically how he's been at the plate. Man, he is. Once he came back from that injury and really no slowing down, I think he had 3 home runs within his first 2 games. Coming back from that ankle sprain, man, he is right back to it. No missing, not a single beat there with Adley Rutschman. All right, I'm turning to my third take on why the Orioles are mid. Let's look at Chris Bassett, who signed for a 1-year, $18.5 million deal in free agency. It was, right at the outset of spring training. The Orioles had just broken camp. He joined the club as an expected so-so innings eater. We expected him to eat innings and, sit around like a 4 ERA. Well, man, he is mid, and he has not been eating innings, and I do not think this is a sustainable formula, Matt. And, he's really got to turn it around quick, because you just look at the let's take a look at some of his, or really just the body of his starts. He's given up 4 runs in half of his starts. He's given up 6 hits in all of his starts except 1, and he's given up a walk in every single outing. So right there, you're looking at a lot of command issues. You're looking at, there have been some bright spots. You look at I believe it was against Cleveland. He had 5 innings there, 4 hits, no runs. But again, this does not feel like a sustainable formula for Chris Bassett, who again was brought in to eat innings. Man, he's only ate about 21 and a third of them, and he's sitting right now with a 6.75 ERA, just 10 strikeouts.
Yeah, more walks than strikeouts so far this year for Chris Bassett, which is a very concerning number. A whip over 2, and while his ERA is at 6.75, the FIP 6.27, so not exactly indicating a whole lot of bad luck there, I should say. So it has been as concerning a start for anybody, and we're going to see him take the ball in this doubleheader here on Thursday against the Astros. He's slated to start Game 1 with Brandon Young going in Game 2. A chance for him to take a step forward. But this Astros lineup has been one of the most prolific in baseball so far, so it is certainly going to be a tough task for him. But overall, Bassett, like you said, was brought in to provide stability, and he's given them anything but. And, as a guy who is 37 years old and not exactly bringing the heat as far as the fastball velocity goes, he really needs all of his off-speed pitches to be dominating and getting a lot of swing and miss, and we're just not seeing a whole lot of that so far. So when you talk about sustainable, Josh, do you think that his performance so far, it's sustainable in that we're going to see more bad Chris Bassett, or is it more that what he has done so far is not sustainable for the Orioles as a whole?
The former, that in terms of, I'm still expecting this, and you hope for this Orioles fan base that he turns it around, and he certainly wasn't cheap. And on that point, let's just gauge and take a look at the other free agent starters that were mentioned throughout this last cycle. And I'll start with the 2 most expensive ones: Ranger Suarez and Dylan Cease. Again, Chris Bassett, he has a 6.75 ERA, just 21 innings with 10 strikeouts. Ranger Suarez, he is up to 35 innings with 29 strikeouts with a 3.09 ERA. Dylan Cease up to 49 strikeouts, 31 innings, and a 2.87 ERA. So that is near the top tier, and basically what you expected when their respective teams handed them their paychecks. And then I'll look at this mid tier, and what kind of like a perfect definition, to relate this to Chris Bassett, because these guys signed, in a much more, I believe, within $4 million of each other, as it relates to Chris Bassett's $18.5 million salary. So Michael King, with a 2.41 ERA over 33 innings pitched and 34 strikeouts. Zach Gallen, less strikeout dominance, only 17 strikeouts, but he is eating innings. He's almost at 29 innings with a 3.14 ERA. Really the only one that is right in line with Chris Bassett, and he was affected by injury, was Merrill Kelly. He's only got 3 starts. Again, not going quite great for him. He's just at 14 innings with a 9.21 ERA and 9 strikeouts. So, man, you look at those names and you think, as an Orioles fan, what could have been with some other guys that were on the market. But Again, Mike Elias navigated the offseason how he did with his acquisition of Shane Baz and then getting Chris Bassett basically at the finish line. And, this is something that you and I talked about, and I don't think this necessarily fits within that realm of, signing starters late in the process, because I still think Chris Bassett was signed early enough. I think this just might be a bit more of an expected career regression at this stage of his career. So we'll see if he's able to turn it around here as May hits.
Yeah, obviously you want to fend off Father Time for as long as possible. And Bassett, who has been so reliable over the years, even though he isn't necessarily the frontline starter that he was just 3-4 years ago, at this point, I think there was still a very reasonable expectation of him to be a middle of the rotation arm who could give you a chance to win every outing. And for the most part, Bassett has given the Orioles a chance. There really hasn't been too much blow-up outings for him where the Orioles were out of it by the second or third inning. But at the same time, you for a pitching staff that's already had a couple of injuries, losing Zach Eflin for the year, Dean Kramer is on the IL. You're already down to your Brandon Youngs and Cade Poviches of the world in terms of starting pitching depth. You need Chris Bassett right now, especially with Trevor Rogers and Kyle Bradish not performing as aces to this point.
Yeah, again, Chris Bassett, there have been 8 starters for the Orioles this year, the worst ERA among all of them at 6.75. So, again, I think, unless he, again, who knows? Maybe he shows up against Houston and shoves, makes us all shut up with, 7 shutout innings, and then the script is rewritten. But right now he's on a sustainable trend, which is not so sustainable for these Orioles.
Fair. And that leads right into my last factor here that has contributed to the Orioles being mid, and that is Trevor Rogers and Kyle Bradish not pitching like co-aces, as I just mentioned here. And I feel like I need to address something. I need to come out and talk about it. Ever since I declared Trevor Rogers an ace on Twitter, he has completely fallen off and not been an ace. Now, I waited a very long time to call Rogers an ace because last year he was excellent. It was a really great run for him, 1.81 ERA over the course of the entire season. Not a full year because he missed the start of the year, but 18 starts was a very big sample size. But before I called anybody an ace, I wanted to see them do it year over year. And after the start to the season that Trevor Rogers had, I said, okay, he is the Trevor Rogers we saw last year. I'm willing to say it. He's an ace. And I started putting in my stories when I would refer to Rogers, I would start calling him ace, like Orioles ace Trevor Rogers. I started saying that. And now he has completely fallen off. I don't know how responsible I am, how much, if I had that kind of power, I don't think I would be covering baseball for a living. I think I'd be maybe doing something in the stock market, earning a couple extra bucks for myself. But I will take the fall here as the baseball gods have not been cruel or have not been nice to Trevor Rogers since I called him an ace.
Well, before Trevor Rogers had, I don't even want to say it's a fall off. I mean, it's been 3 bad starts consecutively here, obviously blown up by his most recent one. He couldn't get out of the second inning. I believe he had 3 earned runs in that start, only faced 11 batters. So, I was the one pounding the table that they need to extend him. And, Mike Elias, the price is maybe, you just mentioned the stock market, Matt. Maybe the price has gone down a little bit. Maybe it's time to really engage, especially if the Orioles believe that, he's had this resurgent turnaround over this past year under their watchful eyes. So, but you do mention Kyle Bradish. You kind of group those guys together. We just talked about Chris Bassett's command, man. Kyle Bradish's command, it's has not been particularly clean from what many expected for him to return to form, especially after we saw last year in his brief time with the major league club of pre-injury Kyle Bradish. It certainly looks like he's taking his time here to really find his former self.
Yeah, I mean, he's walking almost as many batters per 9 as Chris Bassett is so far this year. If that goes to show just how much he has been able to weather the storm a little bit, only having a 4.20 ERA when you're walking over 5 batters per 9 innings is a feat in and of itself. So if he's able to cut that down, I have no doubt that Kyle Bradish is going to be able to return to the pitcher that we saw in 2023 and in spurts when he was healthy over the last 2 years. And that's why I am saying both the bad starts for both Trevor Rogers and Kyle Bradish here are unsustainable, because I believe both of these guys are going to bounce back and be the pitchers that the Orioles need them to be. Just how long it takes them to figure things out, remains to be seen. It's kind of different problems for him. And again, want to plug our colleague Jacob Calvin-Meyer, his newsletter, Extras from Utah. He had a great breakdown of Trevor Rogers' start to the year, referencing a conversation he had with Jim Palmer about BABIP and how Trevor Rogers' BABIP has been particularly bad. And really what it's come down to has been his performance with 2 strikes. He just hasn't executed in those situations, but he's still getting ahead of guys. When you continually are putting yourself in a position of success against opposing hitters, more often than not, you're going to come out on top. And, there's always going to be some regression for Rogers. He was going to come back to earth from what we saw last year, but I still think he could very much be a guy with an ERA in the 2 to 3 range, a true frontline starting pitcher. So I don't have any doubt about that for Rogers. And for Bradish, man, the stuff is too nasty. I mean, I get that the command has not been there so far this year, but the velo has looked great. A lot of good break on his breaking balls. I think there's a ton of movement there that you like from the profile that he has. And his problem has been falling behind too many guys, and that's what has contributed to all of these walks. So if he is able to pitch into the zone a little bit more, trust his stuff, get his command a little bit more fine-tuned, I think the results are going to follow very quickly for Bradish. So I see both of those guys as very much still guys you can depend on to be number 1, number 2 starting pitchers in your rotation every time they take the ball, regardless of how they've gone so far.
Yeah, and I don't have the analytics in front of me, but I'm going to go ahead and assume that Kyle Bradish is a much better pitcher in warmer weather. And, he's pitching some cold outings here early on. So, once, the calendar turns and it starts to heat up, maybe we'll see some improved command there from Kyle Bradish. And, I got to go back to this bit because you mentioned, you name dropped Jacob Calvin-Meyer, again, doing an excellent job on Extras in Utah. You one-upped him, though. You got the pancakes with Mr. Cakes, right? So
I did get that last year.
We'll have to give him a nudge the next time we see JCM.
100%. We can tomorrow. Doubleheader. Lots of time to contemplate our histories there. Josh, let's get your last one here. Wrap up the show.
Yeah, I'm going to finish this one off. And, I started with a positive, and I'm going to go back to a positive. This Orioles team feels gritty, and I feel like this is a sustainable trend in a good light. Under first-year manager Craig Albernaz, I feel like this aspect of the team bodes well for their potential to go on a roll whenever that may be. And, last year, such a roller coaster for you and JCM covering this team with so many ups and downs and a lot of downs at that. And, really the team's longest winning streak was 6 games. I believe this year they're only up to 3 games. So I really do think they can double, maybe quadruple that if they're really capable of going on a run. I think the talent is there. And, we analyze all of these metrics between their defensive miscues and just them playing sloppily, them struggling against hard hit balls. I'm sorry, them struggling against breaking balls. They are hitting them pretty hard. But the underlying thing, which really cannot be measured, is that this team is gritty. And we've seen it on many different levels between a handful of comeback wins. We, obviously the notorious Craig Albernaz foul ball game that we'll remember for forever. Hang that one up in Early Birds franchise lore with Albie really setting the tone and really his team rallying around him. This team, again, feels gritty. I feel like once things start to fall in place, if they do, that this team is capable of going on a run. And Craig Albernaz specifically, he always loves to say that this team is never out of games, that no matter what the run differential is, and truly outside of an outlier, the 17-1 game, which preceded or which was followed by Alex Cora's firing against the Red Sox, really outside of that, it truly has felt that way. And, that's not just buying into what the manager is telling the media, telling their fans. But it really does, I really do feel that they have been in every game. And, it's not necessarily a great formula to live by. You'd rather see them set the tone, which we have seen them, over this past week with really just jumping teams offensively in the early innings. You'd much rather see that than living and dying by the middle 2 later innings on, hoping for some critical swings from the lineup. But altogether, this lineup, this roster feels gritty, and obviously they're following their first-year manager in Craig Albernaz.
Yeah, the Orioles with 3 wins this year when trailing after 7 innings. We've seen them really having to play from behind a lot with some of the poor starting pitching that we've had this year, but also just their inability to score early in games. They've time and time again had taken a while to get going and had to kind of claw their way back into games or find offense, even down to their final strike. As was the case in game against Kansas City last week. They did have one hit all night down to their final strike of the game, trailing 1-0, and they come back to win that game in extra innings. So we are seeing some fight from this team, and it goes back to my first factor here, which was the correctable mistakes, man. If they were just to limit those mistakes, they're playing a brand of baseball that lends itself to being better than your numbers say you are, as opposed to your hitting and your pitching. If you can play with that gritty mentality and be able to always kind of be in games regardless of what the score is, you are going to be playing good baseball. That's just kind of the end of the day. But you got to be able to button up things on the back end and not make sure that you aren't making mistakes that could kind of undermine what you're doing. So I do agree with you that this kind of brand of baseball that they're playing is certainly sustainable, and it is something that bodes well for their ability to play above what their record might be projected to be at the end of the year.
Yep, and it takes another turn here this weekend, and I know they got to finish out the series against Houston with the doubleheader, but you talk about wanting to play against the best, and right now you look at the standings, the team right there in front of them, the Yankees, they get to a litmus test against their AL East rivals this weekend, which on our next episode I'm sure you'll have plenty to recap from that series. But man, I'm again. So were you with me on them being sustainable, them being gritty as an aspect to this team?
I am with you on that, and yeah, I think it is something that we have seen different about this team as opposed to last year, and I think something that suggests that we can call it a slow start because it's a below 500 record, but not a dreadful start like they had last year, but certainly something that they were missing last year that now bodes well for their ability to start to put together some wins here and really turn their record into something that is formidable in the AL East. Because right now, we've talked a lot about how nobody in the American League has started to distance themselves. Well, the Yankees started to distance themselves. They are 20-10 so far this year through their first 30 games. They're playing as we're recording this, but they have been a true force, particularly with their pitching staff so far this year. So Orioles got some work to do if they are going to catch them. And something from last year that I was kind of surprised, never really caught much traction, but it was right at the beginning of the year. Orioles played the Yankees, and they had yet another kind of like benches clearing situation. They've had a couple over the last few years. And I went into the Yankees clubhouse after the game and asked Aaron Judge of this Orioles-Yankees rivalry has really sparked some, kind of tense situations. Have you noticed that? And he looked at me and he goes, "What rivalry?" And I thought that was like, a little bit of a shot there at the Orioles. And of course, the Orioles fizzled out from there. So maybe that was deserved. But the Yankees certainly look at the Orioles as their little brother in the American League East. And it's up to Baltimore to punch up and start to take away some wins from New York if they are really going to be a seriously considered contender in this American League. We're going to go ahead and wrap there. Make sure you are liking, following, subscribing, rating 5 stars to the show on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and give us a follow on social media. That's Twitter, Twitter/X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube as well at Sun Early Birds. Josh, any final words for the good people?
Man, I'm looking forward to seeing how these Orioles shape up against the Yankees, who, again, that's basically is, he didn't say the words out loud, but Aaron Judge little broed them in your conversation. But who knows, maybe they could equal their highest win total or win streak of the year. If they, take this doubleheader, they'll go in there with a 3-game win streak and, maybe they match their highest winning streak from all of last year, depending on this weekend's results. But also looking forward to our next episode. Ravens having rookie mini camp this weekend, and certainly, a lot of attention to this draft class. But I think underlying factor, and you and Sam covered this in your last episode, but they're going to have to end up signing a lot of undrafted free agents. Last year they had a handful. I wouldn't be surprised if the number was higher this year, just because based on the number of roster spots that this team needs to fill. And, some intriguing faces on there for sure. Diego Pavia being one of them. Is he going to be the third string quarterback behind Lamar Jackson and Snoop Huntley? We will see. But again, a lot of going on around Baltimore, and we're always ready and excited to bring it to you guys here on Early Birds.
Yeah, with the draft now in the rearview mirror, looking forward to getting back into our normal schedule of kind of half and half episodes with Orioles and Ravens. So looking forward to that. I will be out in Miami next week as well. So we'll be doing an episode with me from out there, talk about that series, which immediately follows the Yankees one, which Jacob will be covering. So very much looking forward to breaking it all down, as well as rookie minicamp. A lot to talk about, as you say. But we're going to wrap there. Thank you all so much for listening, and have a good one.